Oh, all right, we are golden. Good morning, everyone. Today I have with me Dr. Shayla, and she is a physician that works with busy professionals, and her expertise is in the area of.
Oh yeah, your mic.
Okay, sorry
There we
about
go.
that. We had some
Few
technical
technical issues this morning.
difficulties this morning, but she focuses on metabolism and hormone optimization. So her contribution is a wonderful course that she added to the Vegan Health Bundle today. So without further ado, I want to pass it over to you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your area of expertise and your passion, and what you help your clients with.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you so much, Courtney, for having me on your channels today. And I'm happy to be here and happy to share about the vegan health bundle that we're both, a part of. So a bit about me. I am the physician owner of Essence of Health Wellness Clinic and Coaching. I am based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, although I am opening a second clinic location in Atlanta, Georgia. That should be opening next month, actually. I am a board certified physician in family medicine, functional medicine, as well as obesity medicine. And so I'm also a certified menopause specialist, and I help women and certified in plant-based nutrition. And so I help women. Typically, my patients are between 35 to 65, and they're usually women who have metabolism or hormonal concerns. And so we work holistically with getting them back to sustainable health. And so I incorporate a lot of things like plant-based nutrition and active intentional movement, as well as mindset strategies, and, mental health and balancing all of those things for the whole health spectrum to provide personalized care.
That is awesome. We are so in line because those are the pillars of vitality as well. Mindset, nutrition, which is plant forward. It's plant based, but
Yeah,
not everybody's there yet. And then
exactly. Yeah.
style and being intentional with movement and all of that. So we totally vibe on
Yeah.
all of the above. So tell us a little bit about your contribution to this year's bundle and what kind of inspired you to put this course into the bundle specifically.
Yeah, so my contribution is called Meal Planning Hacks for Fast and Healthy Meals. And so where it came from is just my work over the years. I've worked with just a lot of busy professional women. So I've had women from all different walks of life, business owners, I've had therapists, I've had doctors, lawyers, just teachers, all really busy professional women. And they are spouses, they are mothers, they are running their businesses, and so they wear many hats. And so what tends to happen though is that they put themselves last, unfortunately, and when it comes to their health, because they're so busy, caring for all of these other places and people in their lives. And so what I would find myself doing is really, working with them to making things helpful but not challenging, because after worked all day, I'm a mom and a wife as well, and so after I worked all day, the last thing I want to do is then go spend an hour in the kitchen. It's just like, no, I don't want to do that. And so but you do want to feed your body something nutritious, and you want to feed your family something nutritious. And so that's where this idea came from. And so really I just put together this presentation for the bundle that really just shares those strategies, what I've been sharing with my patients over the years, of really how to get food on your plate that's also tastes good, because we want it to taste good. One of the main concerns people have, even when they're going plant-based, is like, well, I don't want to just eat salad, because that's what they think, and so it's food that tastes good, and that it also doesn't take you forever, in the kitchen to prepare it. And so that's really the basis for it.
For sure. Is this something that you see as a common issue, like a common thread amongst the patients that you see on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So, being a physician, what I see a lot of are those, really chronic, common health conditions. So high blood pressure, diabetes, fatty liver disease, high cholesterol. But these things are killing us. And a lot of it, comes from the foods that we eat. It comes from, the stress in our lives because we do have these, really busy lifestyles. And so, it takes a balance of these things. But then what tends to happen is we know that these, ultra processed foods are easy to attain. You can grab them, they're off the shelf, they're shelf stable. So it feels, super easy. And the same with fast food. You feel like you can drive through the drive through, and just feed everybody. And then you didn't have to stand in the kitchen. But, there has to be a better way. We have to still prioritize our health because those same conditions that I mentioned, they're preventable. They're largely preventable. And it's just really a matter of what we're consuming and what we're putting on our plate. And then how to do that, but how to make it fit into your lifestyle. Because I'm also big on telling my patients that it's not a fad. I don't want them on the next fad diet or doing something that, they can only sustain for a couple of weeks. And then they're like, yeah, I got to go back to, what I was doing. Because that's just not going to work. So it has to be sustainable. And so that's the other part when you make things almost seamless, for yourself and your clients. And I'm sure you probably have seen this too when coaching, when it comes easier to them, then that's what makes it stick and make it doable.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, and these kind of weren't questions that were originally on my radar, but when you're working with your clients, with your patients, are they typically already plant-based, or are we trying to help get them into a healthier state by being more plant-forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a mix, honestly. So, and that surprised me too. I thought, I was like, well, I'll probably just get all the vegans, who'll just come. But no, it's not. It's a mix. And so I have some patients who have tried plant-based before. And they, the common things that I hear, I'll tell you, some of the commonalities, people will say, well, all I ate was mac and cheese all the time, so it was like heavy carb, but not really, veggie, or, oh, I didn't feel well because then all I was eating was salad because I wasn't, sure. And so those are some of the commonalities that I'll hear from people when they've tried it before, but they know that, they do need to clean up their plate. Now, I'm the first to tell them that you don't have to be vegan. My goal is not to make every one of my patients vegan. My goal is to, is to make them healthy. And so what healthy looks like, though, it can look different for a lot of people. But it is very plant forward. And we talk about, ways of getting that healthful nutrition. One of the things I always point out, especially to my folks who are like, I was hungry all the time, when I tried to go plant-based, I was like, you probably weren't eating enough.
Eat more.
Yeah, because
I love that because I can eat more and not gain pounds.
Right, exactly.
Right things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to follow up on that, you mentioned fad diets and they're not being sustainable. They can be restrictive. What would you say to those that feel like maybe plant-based eating might seem restrictive?
Yeah. So when you think of it in probably kind of the traditional sense how people have thought of it, then it may seem restrictive. Because I always like to point out, and I'm glad you asked that question because it brought up what I was about to bring in anyway. I always like to point out, when you go to like a restaurant, per se, and you order, the traditional dish, they give you your meat, which usually the meat is like, half or 3/4 of the plate. And then they give you these little side dishes, maybe some little string beans, a little coleslaw kind of little thing. But it's, just a tiny bite of the sides. And so when people think, plant-based, they think, well, I'm just getting that. And I'm not getting, all the rest of that. So I'm like, you're gonna be hungry, and that's not even good. I just got the little 2 tablespoons. And so it's really rewiring, the brain to that. To say that, no, it's not restricted. You can have more, rethink that salad. So when you have that salad, yeah, you've got your lettuce, greens or whatever, but then you can put, beans on that salad. You can add nuts to that salad. You can add, pickled vegetables to that salad. You can, go crazy with it. I tell a lot of my patients, I'm like, nobody has ever gotten diabetes from eating too much salad. I mean, is not
Yeah.
a thing. So it's like you can eat it, eat the food. Add some sweet potatoes to it. Add it. It doesn't have to be just this little side dish like you're used to seeing things. So it's really though just rewiring that thought process and how we look at it.
Yeah, retraining how we view things. And I know there's so many other things to eat other than salad, but since we're on the topic, like you can do a toppings salad. Like I'm all for greens, but you can leave the lettuce and do all the toppings, do sweet potatoes, broccoli, like your onions, zucchini, like all tomatoes, all the things, and have a big hearty bowl of that. And like that can be a salad, right?
Yeah, and you will not be hungry.
No, I eat all the time and I love it. But my next question is specifically with meal planning and preparation, how does this help enhance our hormones and enhance our, balance those and help with metabolism? I know a lot of women, we're so used to restriction and cutting down on our caloric intake and our carbohydrate intake, and then it actually wrecks our metabolism. And then we wonder why we can't lose weight anymore, and we're eating, hopefully not 800, but some people 800, 1200 calories, and they're like, I'm not losing any weight. I feel like crap. I have no energy. So how does your method of preparing meals and being intentional with that help with these issues?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question as well. So what happens when we do, more of these kind of restrictive diets and we're not eating, as you said, it actually wrecks our metabolism. Food is fuel. So, I'll start there. And when we eat, it actually fuels our body. Our bodies need certain foods. And so that's where, your macronutrients come into play, your protein, your fat, and your carbohydrates. And I point that out to a lot of people that the reason those are macronutrients because they make up a large part of what our bodies actually need. And people are always surprised that, carbohydrates are one of those things because a lot of people think it's just the protein. You don't need the protein. But carbs are one of those macronutrients as well. But it's how you do those things. And so that's where the meal planning comes into place, because if we are constantly, taxing our brains, it gets to a point, well, I just won't eat right now, or I'm just gonna, fast, or, whatever that thing is, which there is certainly a place for intermittent fasting. And don't get me wrong, but that's a whole different topic. But what we're talking about when it comes to the planning, if you've already got pre-prepared meals or meals that are easy to prepare, then you can have that healthful nutrition. And so that brings me back to metabolism and fueling your body. When we eat, what happens is our blood sugar spikes usually, and it depends on what you eat. For instance, if you eat a donut, that blood sugar is really going to spike up high, versus if you eat an apple, it's going to spike a little bit, but then it's going to start to balance out. And when our blood sugar spikes, our body is designed to bring in insulin, unless you've got type 1 diabetes, which is a whole different animal where you're not making insulin. But for the majority of us, our body is then going to throw in some insulin. Insulin is designed to bring that blood sugar back down to a steady state. Most things in our body want to be at a steady state anyway. But what happens is if you're constantly taxing your body to release more insulin, then the insulin starts to not work as well. And that's what insulin resistance is. It starts to take more and more of that insulin to bring that blood sugar back down to a steady state. In turn, you're going to start holding on to more fat, because insulin also promotes fat storage. And when your body's having to keep pushing out more and more because it's not working as well, then you're going to be retaining more fat. But by eating those healthful foods, those healthful carbohydrates, the high fiber ones, your dark leafy greens, your fruit, the skin on it. So your apples, your pears, your grapes, your berries, that skin is where the fiber content is. Your potatoes with the skin on it. Those things are more slowly released forms of glucose to our system. And so our insulin isn't having to raise as high, and it isn't having to work as hard to bring that blood sugar back to a steady state. It also takes longer to go through our gut system, those types of foods. And so you stay fuller for longer.
Mhm.
And you haven't taxed your insulin system and you aren't storing those things into fat. And so that in turn, your metabolism does what it's supposed to do. It uses that food for fuel. And then that's how you're able to maintain a healthful weight and prevent things like diabetes and fatty liver disease and those conditions.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for the breakdown. So there's so many directions that we could go from that alone.
Yeah.
But let's start with, so what does a healthy meal look like for you? What would you tell a client? You know, we think about balanced meals, but does anybody really, nobody's really told what that means,
Right.
especially if they're not familiar with being plant forward or plant based. They don't know what the balance looks like. So what would a
Right.
healthy, nutritious, healing, nourishing meal look like?
Yeah. So first I'm going to go back to those macronutrients because you do want to make sure that the foods that you're eating do contain a source of protein, carbohydrate, and fat because those are the macronutrients. A lot macro means large for my other Latin speakers or whatever. Yeah, yeah. And so you do want to make sure that you're covering those things on your plate. Then the other side to it is color. You want to make sure that your food has a variety of colors. The reason for that, when it comes to plant foods, the pigment actually are different types of vitamins and phytonutrients. They're different types of vitamins and nutrients in those different colors. And so that's why you don't just want all of the spinach and nothing else, because then you'll be missing all of those other, parts and those important nutrients. So you want it to be variable in color as well. And so one of the recipes that I share, even in the bundle, is a sweet potato meal. And so what I share is really, different ways that you can use these same ingredients to make different types of foods. But one of them is a savory sweet potato dish. And so what it is it's the sweet potatoes and then it's a slaw, but it's not like, probably not like your grandma's coleslaw with the mayo and that kind of stuff. It's like just the slaw, just the cabbage and the carrots, that kind of thing. And then there's a topping that's a chickpea with the peanut sauce that you make. You make it out of, natural peanut butter. Yeah. And then you top it with my favorite. Yeah, some sriracha to give it a little kick. There's Yeah, but if you think through that, you've got your sweet potato, which is giving you your carbs and your fiber because you do want to keep the skin. You've got your chickpeas, you're getting your protein and your fiber as well into that, and a bit of fat in your chickpeas. You've got your nuts from the peanut butter, and you're getting your healthful fats. And so that you're hitting those macronutrients. And if you think about, I show pictures in the bondo, but if you look, you've got all these colors there as well. Yeah, and so that way that you're getting those other essential vitamins and nutrients there.
For sure, those micronutrients. And it's so interesting. We're so focused on macros, and I always tell people that the macros are really important. They're like the gasoline to your car. But the micronutrients are like the oil. If we're not getting our, a lot of things today are marketed, like our ultra processed foods are marketed like high protein or keto or whatever. And we're looking at it and it might have that macro, but it's completely devoid of other nutrients, right? So we want to make sure we're putting together plates that are nourishing our body with both of those things. And you did mention, so you mentioned this a couple different ways. So you mentioned before with the last question, kind of coming home and you're tired and the last thing you want to do is spend time in the kitchen. And then you're also talking about kind of different ways to reuse the same ingredients. And something that is touched on is decision fatigue. And that is a very real thing when it comes to food. We are making hundreds of decisions about food every single day. And then when you're trying to eat healthfully and trying to have one of those balanced meals, it can kind of like at the end of the day, you're just like, I don't want to do it. So how can people reduce decision fatigue when it comes to food so it makes meal planning more simple for them?
Yeah, great question as well. And that's one of the things, I I have a podcast, and so I'll tell the audience that it's a Self Tea Time podcast. And so one of the episodes that I recently did, it was more of a New Year's episode, and so they talked about kind of some New Year resolution kind of things. And so one of the topics though was just about what you mentioned, decision fatigue. And so what they found was that for women, our decision fatigue, like you said, is from the moment you get up. And so, there's no wonder by the end of the day when, the kids are asking, well, what's for dinner? You're like, I don't know. You have thought all day long and you are worn out. And it gets worse. A lot of the women I work with over 40 who are then entering that perimenopause state. So you throw in those hormonal imbalances that are coming into place, and then that brain fog on top of all of that decision fatigue. And then it's just really compounding itself. And you feel like you're losing your mind. And so you really do. Yeah. Because if you think about, even from the moment you get up, you're thinking about, oh, well, does the kid, do they have their raincoat? Did they get their homework in their backpack? Oh, what earrings am I going to wear with my outfit? What meeting do I have that morning? What's for breakfast? So you thought about all of this, probably within the first 5 minutes of you opening your eyes, in the morning kind of thing. So when it comes to the food, though, what you can do, I'm a gadget person. I like gadgets. And so some of the things, that I have at my house, I've got the crock pot, I've got the Instapot, I've got the Ninja Creamy. That thing is good. But that's a different topic.
Big fan.
Right. So gadgets, but make them useful to you, So for instance, if you're planning for breakfast, throw the steel cut oats or the grits. I'm in the South, we like grits. Throw them in the Instapot. Go take your shower, get yourself ready. By the time you've done that, it's going to be ready and it'll be ready to serve. All you did was take 5 minutes to put your ingredients in there and push that button. So, use it, make things like that your friend. If you have more time on the weekend, well, start on the weekend. And start planning, in your mind, because typically on the weekend, you're not you take that work piece out. So a little less decisions that you have to make. And then you can be more focused on what you're going to put on your plate during the week. And then that way you can make sure you've got the right ingredients at home, that you've got, at least a loose plan as to what that may look like. If you have to batch cook some things beforehand, you can put your crock pot to work. You can put a stew in there, or some type of casserole that you can have pre-prepared. Some of the things I like to batch cook, I'll usually batch cook a batch of brown rice for the week, some types of beans as well, and then I like having the little boxes of the pre-prepared, pre-washed spinach, the large box, and the pre-washed spring mix. So those are every week. I'm going to just have those on hand just to grab and go. But really, having things like that ready to take just those extra kind of steps off of your plate. And then you're not having to, worry so much about it as your week goes forth and it gets busier.
Okay, perfect. So what would you say to the mom, or maybe it's the dad or the grandparent, whoever is running this family and they're burnt out, they're exhausted? How can you mentioned some of the tools, but what are either some mindset shifts or like one thing that they could take away from this conversation to help make their lives easier around healthy meal planning?
Yeah. So one of the things that I actually have my patients do is I have them give some thought when they're eating. So before we ever change anything, I'm like, okay, when you're at your next dinner, sit down, and as you're eating, just think, how am I feeling as I'm consuming this food? After I'm done eating, and write it down if you need to, because it's helpful in the future when you're kind of looking back through things. But how are you feeling after you ate it? Were you full, first of all? Or did you feel overly full? Did you feel bloated? Did you feel anxious after you ate the first time? For some reason, did it make you feel anxious? Or did it make you sleepy? And so kind of thinking through those things. And then, when you're cleaning up your plate and eating something that's more healthful, think about how that made you feel. Did you feel more energized? Did you feel more clarity and less stress? And usually our bodies are going to tell us what our bodies want and what it needs. And so then those are your cues to know that. And then as you're getting busy and you're thinking about these things, thinking about how you want to feel, if you have a goal, I'm big on goal setting, because usually if we have some type of goal we're hedging towards, that keeps us focused on what we're doing, even if it's just a little goal. So having a goal for something, if you're on 3 blood pressure medicines, maybe your goal should be, I just want to have 2 over the next, couple of months. And so if that's your goal, then say, okay, at least, twice a week, I'm going to start with something that I cooked at home, something that's more healthful, something that, has more plants on my plate. And just really thinking about what your body wants, what your body needs, and what you are desiring to achieve.
I think that's an awesome practice, because a lot of the time we don't tune in, and we might feel uncomfortable or tired later, but we're not really relaying it back. And it's something that I've noticed. It's like, yeah, after a long day, it's easier to order food. And then I'm like, but I would feel so much better physically and mentally if I made dinner tonight.
Right.
So, and there's so many ways you can chop up things ahead of time, just have vegetables chopped, have fruit washed, stuff like that. I'm not the best at doing that.
Yeah.
But I do make big batches when I make stuff. So I try to
Right.
at least make enough food for 2 days, but really tuning in and seeing how you feel and letting that like sink in and register, because that's going to help train you as to like what you really want. It's like, well, I don't want that. Instead of like going through things mindlessly and just, you know what I mean? Just being intentional and mindful about it. So very cool.
Right. Yeah. And that can translate to a lot of things in life. It comes back to kind of that hustle and bustle. It's the American way, that we're always hustling. So, but just kind of slowing down just a bit, and kind of thinking about, how you feel and how you want to feel, just in a lot of things. Yeah. Can take you far.
For sure. Absolutely. What would you say to someone that's like, I tried meal planning and it didn't work out for me?
Yeah. So to those folks, I will say, then that's where the other side of the hacks come into place. Because I am one of those persons. My husband will tell you, I'll say, earlier, I've got something stored there, and I'm like, I don't really want to eat that. I don't have taste for that. And so for those people, I say that's where those other things. And so the things that you can do quickly still. You mentioned about things being pre-chopped. Well, I am the queen of the pre-chopped things. And there are grocery stores now. So ladies or folks, if you're listening, there are stores now that will pre-chop a lot of things for you. I found pre-chopped sweet potatoes. I found, and they're in the fresh section. So it's not like nothing in a can. They're fresh. I found pre-chopped onions, pre-chopped peppers. I love like the frozen vegetables, frozen broccoli, super easy to make as you go through. And so I will then go to those things and just, put something together that way if I want something that I hadn't pre-prepared, but you still want it to be fairly easy to create. And then also sauce. And so I'm a big believer in creating different flavors to satisfy your palate too. And so there's a lot of balsamics, and I actually got this tip from Chef AJ. And so they're California balsamic. They're a small business, but their balsamics are amazing. And they've got all these different flavors of them, and they're oil free. And so, and it's not like balsamic, like, just gonna put on your salad, but they are like truly, you can make sauces. Like there's a curry one that's my favorite. And I probably put it in almost everything. But you can, just use different flavors in your foods and different spices and seasonings to liven up those things as well. And that gives you your variety. So if you hadn't, pre-batched anything, or if you just don't feel like eating it by the time Wednesday comes, like I'll do, do something else, and create a new flavor.
For sure. I love that idea of picking out the stuff that's, pre-chopped or frozen. If you really don't have the time, that can be a huge time saver. And sauces can make a huge difference as far as variety. If you're someone that craves variety but is short on time, changing up your sauce or your seasonings and stuff like that can be huge because
Yeah,
it's like a brand new flavor for you,
exactly.
right?
Yep. Uh-huh.
So let me see here. Are there any other things that you want to, little nuggets of advice or inspiration or any misconceptions that you'd love to share before we hop off?
Yeah. So really, and this is more for my non plant-based folks out there who, because we see a lot of people who are skeptical about, plant-based eating. But just give it a try. Don't be intimidated by it. Don't, feel like it's too hard. I know a lot of times, and there are some awesome recipes in this bundle that you can cook all types of whatever is, your taste buds are asking for. But don't feel like you have to do all of that. You can keep it really simple. Just start simple, give it a try, take note of, what your body's telling you and how you feel, and just, go from there, and just don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple.
For sure. Awesome. So where can everyone find you? I know you mentioned the podcast and you work one-on-one with clients for hormones and metabolisms, more of a focus there, but you work on a wide, array of health conditions and stuff. So tell us a little bit more about where they can find you.
Yeah, so Essence of Health Wellness Clinic. If you go to www.essenceofhealthwellnessclinic.com, you can find me there. I am on Facebook and Instagram at Essence of Health Wellness Clinic, and I am on TikTok at Dr. Shayla. And I would love to chat with you. I do offer a free consultation. Would love to chat with you and see if I can help.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, everyone, we are wrapping up Bundle Week. It is on sale until Sunday evening. I think it's 11:59 Pacific time.
Yep.
It's on sale till, and it will be gone until next year. But next year's bundle will not be the same. So you get everything in there for basically less than $1. It is
$49. You can't beat it.
Yeah, over $4,500 worth of resources. And again, like we were talking about, you do not have to be vegan. You do not have to be plant-based to start supporting yourself nutritionally and adding in more healthy meals, snacks, mindsets, techniques, movement. All of these things are contained in the bundle. It's not just limited to recipes, but there's so many recipes that you can just snag one and try one a week. So check out the bundle. I'll link it in the comment section below. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message. But that is it for me today, Dr. Shayla. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and I thank you for being here.
You do the same, Courtney. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.